Using a 19mm socket, let's go ahead and remove our lug nuts. If your vehicle is equipped with a hubcap like ours, go ahead and grab that hubcap or center cap, pop that off, grab the wheel, pull it off, and set it aside. We're going to go ahead and replace our sway bar end link. Ours is actually broken. It's separated from the lower link right here. So we're going to start by using a 14mm wrench and a number 5 Allen wrench. We're going to try and loosen this nut. On the upper portion of the link connected to the sway bar, we're going to try and remove this nut here, right on the back side. We're having some issues because the CV axle is in the way. We're going to try and get our gear wrench on here and loosen this. And it is rusted solid on there. Because of the clearance issue, I can't get too many other tools in there. So we're going to go ahead and cut this off of the sway bar end link. Before we cut this, we're just going to use a pair of pliers. We're going to try and pop off the rest of the end link and leave just the stub there. And there we have it. We'll just cut off the rubber boot so we can see where our cutting wheel is going to have access to. Now that we ground off the front side here, we're just going to go ahead and tap the remainder of the bolt out. On this lower ball joint, there is a cotter pin right here. We're going to go ahead and use a pair of pliers and remove that cotter pin. Using an 18mm socket, let's go ahead and remove this lower ball joint nut. Using a 19mm socket, let's go ahead and remove the forward control arm bolt. Using a 19mm wrench, we're going to reach in behind the axle shaft to our rearward control arm bolt, and we're going to pull it down and go ahead and loosen that. Now for us to get in here, we use the wrench, and because the wrench is short, we're using a pipe on the end of the wrench for leverage. I'm going to go ahead and pull this down, and we're going to continue to work this. We'll go ahead and loosen that bolt. Once you get it loose, you can go ahead and take it out. Just move that wrench back and forth. And we do this until we can go ahead and remove that bolt. What we decided to do is remove the 14mm bolts holding this sway bar to the chassis here, and then on the other side, this is going to allow us to get more room to move our wrench to remove the control arm bolt. I'm going to use a long punch here, put it right behind the head of the bolt. And we're just going to try and tap this out the rest of the way. We're going to jack up our brake rotor. And what this is doing is this is taking some of the preload off of the ball joint and control arm. I'm going to compress this up a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and strike the knuckle here of the control arm and release this from the ball joint. Now that we have our ball joint separated, we need to go ahead and remove it completely. So we're going to use our ball joint tool. And go ahead and move that control arm around a little bit, and we'll work this bolt out. Go ahead and grab your control arm. And want to pull this out, so we're going to use a pry bar to get underneath and just work this. Be careful to hold the control arm while you're doing this. You don't want to drop this on your foot. Let's go ahead and take a control arm and line it up in the chassis. And once that's up there, we're going to go ahead and line up our ball joint. And we're just going to get the nut started and just going to get started a few threads. We're going to go ahead and tap the control up into the chassis. Now what we're going to do is go ahead and line up our bolt and just kind of grab the control arm and wiggle this around, get that to line up. And then we'll get that bolt started a few threads. Once that's started, let's move to our rear bolt. Then we're going to go ahead and raise our control arm, try and get our bolt lined up in here. And get that started a few threads. With both of these bolts started, let's go ahead and snug those down. I'm going to go ahead and tighten this up. So before torquing down the bolts on your control arm, you want to go ahead and put your jack underneath the vehicle, jack up the control arm just until the vehicle starts coming off of your jack stands. You torque these here with the vehicle loaded with the weight on the suspension. You want to torque these down to 61 foot-pounds and repeat for the back bolt. Snug that down. We're going to go ahead and torque that down to 45 foot-pounds. Now we want to pay attention to locating the hole in the ball joint shaft here so that our castle notch lines up with it. It appears that we're off a little bit. So what we're going to do is tighten up that nut a little bit more until that hole lines up. Let's now go ahead and take our cotter pin, slide that through, bend over the bottom half, and then we're simply going to trim the excess off. Let's go ahead and raise our sway bar up into our position here. We'll just get our bolt started here. Let's go ahead and snug those down. So I'm going to go ahead and install our sway bar end link. Get the nut started on the upper one here. Get that on a few threads. And then we can go ahead and position that lower. And let's go ahead and get the nut started on that one. Once that's on, we'll go ahead and snug these down. Using our 15mm socket, I want to go ahead and tighten down this nut right here. Our ball joint on the inside here is spinning, so we're going to use our thin 14mm to hold the nut on the back side. Let's go ahead and tighten up the top. I'm going to go ahead and torque these to 29 foot-pounds. And repeat for the top. Go ahead and install the wheel. Now, if your vehicle is equipped with the hubcap that locks on with the lug nuts, you want to go ahead and locate the notch in the hubcap for your valve stem. Line that up. And we'll get those lug nuts started. I'm going to go ahead and snug down the lug nuts. Let's go ahead and torque our wheel down to 80 foot-pounds.